Hey guys, Marcus Melnick here with Firearm Mentor. Hope you're enjoying my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These little things are free to you and really help the channel. I appreciate your support. Enjoy. Thank you.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic, your host. And we have a bit of a celebrity/athlete on the line, Brent Novoselsky. Brent, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate it.
The reason Brent is on the show is, I reconnected with him after years. The last time I saw him before about a month ago was actually at Tasty Spin, when I said, oh yeah, you were on the Chicago Vikings, because I misspoke. I don't know if you remember that. I do, and my wife was like, that's a Minesota Vikings. I was like, oh my God. I was so embarrassed. But last month, there was an event called Hunger Resource Network. It was their annual luncheon, and Brent was the keynote speaker. Brent is a Skokie native, like I am. We went to the same high school, although he's a little bit before me. His brother was a senior when I was a freshman, and I remember specifically, I was volunteering for the police department, and I was raising money by selling candy bars. And I knocked on your door, and one of your brothers, I think it was Seth, opened the door, and it was like I was looking at Fezzik from The Princess Brides. I just kept looking up and up and up and up. Oh my God, this guy's huge. And then I realized who he was. I don't know if he bought a candy bar or not, but in any event, I'm so thrilled to have you here. In your own words, can you just tell everyone, what is your personal origin story and how did you get to where you are today?
No, it was, for me, it's about growing up on Culver Street, which is a dead-end street in Skokie, the last street, really northernmost street in Skokie. My backyard was Wilmette. I grew up, basically, that street was our playground, although we had Lawler Park about a block away.
The Rocket Ship Park.
The Rocket Ship Park, yep. Absolutely. And we used to go and literally, we barely changed out of our school clothes when we were in elementary school. We'd run out to that street and just remember playing a lot of Nerf football in that street. And we played every sport, though. We played baseball, football, basketball, everything that you could imagine. Nerf football, to me, that was the game. I loved playing 2-on-2 football. We'd go outside. We had curbs, so there was out of bounds. We had where they used to fix the cracks in the cement. There were the black lines that they had. So there were certain black lines that were kind of touchdown markers. And,
right.
Occasionally there'd be cars that were parked on the street, so you could use the cars as picks, which made it kind of interesting. But we had a lot of kids in that neighborhood. I think the neighborhood had probably 14 houses, and we probably had 40, 50 kids, all in similar ages. There were 3 kids mostly in every house, and there was a whole band of ages. And everybody seemed to play with everybody else. I used to play with the older kids, and I think that really helped me just mature more physically and athletically. And it was just fun. We just get together, you come outside, and it's love of the game, and just wonderful place to grow up. We had a wonderful school system with Highland School, Old Orchard Junior High, and Niles North High School. They were all tremendous schools. It was really, for me, just trying to be the best that I could be. And, you talk about the wonder years, and it was a great time to grow up. It was that we'd be out playing with our friends, and Mom used to come in when the lights go on. Well, we didn't have any street lights. So we used to play hide and go seek tag and call it Bloody Murder at night, which was a tag game. And they, later in high school, they put up street lights, and it kind of ruined all the nighttime games. But it really was, everybody was kind of raised by that neighborhood. Just really grateful for what we had and growing up in that area. And it was a predominantly Jewish area, so we'd go to Hebrew school. And that was the one thing that curtailed my athletic endeavors was afternoon Hebrew school, 4 to 6 or 6 to 8. And it was a little tough, but, you got through it. And, we were taught by survivors of the Holocaust. Teacher would be teaching, and the sleeve would come up, and you'd see the numbers and be like, wow, what is that? What is that? And they tell you the story, and not a lot of them told a lot of the story. It was a tough subject, but just being around that and just the respect that we had for what had basically just happened. I mean, this is the 70s, and this happened in the mid 40s, so it's not that,
right.
It wasn't that long ago.
Right.
So,
you said something that kind of piqued my interest a little bit. I thought that where you lived was Stenson. It was Highland?
It was Highland. Oh, yeah, we took the bus. And Highland School, to me, I still dream about the breaks that we used to have. We used to have recess.
Yes.
And we used to go out, and that area outside. I still have dreams about that area where Nick Bruston and I used to play football against other kids, and we would throw the ball the length of the whole open field and catch touchdown passes. And,
wow.
I still, to this day, I'll still dream about that field, which really wasn't a field. It was just a slab of concrete.
Yeah, it was blacktop or something like that.
Yeah, blacktop. So we'd play kickball out there.
Yeah.
And we'd have races, and we'd play football. We played everything, every game imaginable. And that's where I started to realize that, I kind of was pretty good at athletics. But for me, yes, education was so important. I'm still connected with a whole bunch of my former teachers from Niles North that I literally every couple months have breakfast with, and
oh, wow.
and a bunch of them are still clients of mine, and it's wonderful to hang out with them, go play golf with them, or just see their number come up on my phone. And these are the people that really helped me everything that I needed to impact my life from the fact of I felt like I was a sponge in school, where I just wanted to get as much information. I just wanted to be the best that I could be, and just build up as much information, education that I could. And these people were just wonderful teachers and wonderful people. So it still affects me to this day.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. What about your post-high school experience education-wise?
I went to the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business. I was supposed to go to Michigan. I was one of those guys that I knew I was a good player. I was a all-conference football player, all-conference baseball player. I was captain of both teams. I was actually a better baseball player, but I couldn't hit a curveball. I was a catcher. And football, I grew, and I was actually a better defensive player than offense, but I could catch. So I played in the North-South Suburban All-Star Game, the first annual one that they had. And I was going to Penn, and the guy that was the other tight end was going to Missouri on a full ride. And all these guys were going somewhere on a full ride. And I got out there and I practiced with him at Buffalo Grove High School for a week. And then we played the game. I caught four passes. And I got to tell you, that really the level of talent, I played with those guys. And beyond, I played better than those guys. So it was just one of those things where, Niles North was not winning games. We weren't going to the playoffs. So not a lot of people knew who I was.
Right.
Plus, I figured I had a lot of growing to do in 4 years. Being 18 years old, you're coming out of high school. Is your growth finished at that point? And I knew I was just starting to lift weights and getting stronger, getting faster. And I knew what I could do. But, I wound up really standing out in that game and proving myself that I could play at that level. So I was supposed to go to Michigan, and they were recruiting me. And, it wasn't one of those things where they were recruiting me to give me a big scholarship. They actually told me I'd be a preferred walk-on, which I was fine. For me, it was just give me the chance, give me the ability. I wanted to go to Michigan. They had a great business school. I just wanted to get into school and use football as a trade-off for that. So right. I wanted to play football. I thought it would be kind of cool. So Michigan, they didn't come out. They called me. I said, okay, great. I said, okay, fill out your application and we'll pay the application fee. I said, great. Fill out my application, send it in. Don't hear anything from them. I start getting letters from the admissions office. Hey, we got your application, but we didn't get your application fee. And I'd call them up and said, hey, well, athletic department, the football team's supposed to take care of that application fee. And they, of course, said, we don't have anything to do with the football department. Of course, yeah, right. We have no idea about that. So I was calling the guy that was recruiting me, who was the running back coach at the time. And basically that was a time where, it was not voicemail. It was old school, right. Busy signal, or you get the machine. So leave messages and nothing, never call me back. So finally they sent me a letter saying, hey, if you don't give us that application fee, we're going to get rid of your application. And I said, well, I really want to go to school. I never thought football would be the end all be all. I used football as a conduit, and I sent him a check, and I got into Michigan Business School. In the interim, Penn had come to talk to me because my co-captain in Niles North, Nick Bruston, was going to an Ivy League school. So he actually wound up going to Brown.
Okay.
And all the Ivies, once you get one team, one school looking at you, the other schools tend to jump on. So the Ivy Leagues, they were coming in, Penn was coming to recruit Nick, and they watched some film, and they said, hey, who's this? I was pretty good, so I was showing up on film. They said, who's this guy? And he said, well, he mentioned my name, and he said, well, how's his grades? I'm like, well, actually, he's top 10 in the class, like not even 10%, but top 10 out of like 500 kids.
Right.
They said, well, let me talk to him. So I got to talk to Don Dobes, who was a coach at Penn at the time, and was recruiting a bunch of guys in Chicago. They had 15 kids from Chicago, a lot of Catholic League guys, and guys that were borderline on the education piece, like the SAT. My SAT was horrible because I took it during a doubleheader, baseball. Okay. And I didn't want to be there. My ACT was okay. My SAT was not good, but there was no way I was going to get into Penn or Wharton without football as a little bit of a push. So he told me all about Penn. I said, this is interesting. Wharton School of Business, best business school in the nation. Right. He goes, hey, why don't you come out for a visit? I wound up taking the last visit there and looked around Philadelphia. I had no idea where Philadelphia was, by the way. I had no clue. So fly into Philly. I get to see Penn. They're right in the city. Franklin Field's got the building at one end, and then the bricks. So the bricks kind of reminded me of Wrigley Field. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's pretty tradition. And Penn had just started winning with Jerry Burnt as head coach. And they were turning around the fortunes. And I said, this could be a really cool place to go to school. So I wound up putting my application in and got accepted at Penn, but didn't get accepted to Wharton. I'd have to transfer in after my first year. And with everything going on in Michigan, I said, I think Penn's going to be a better option because they actually wanted me to come.
Right.
And by the way, the application fee for Michigan was $15. So it was over $15 that I said, it was more principle than anything.
Right.
So I wound up going to Penn. Absolutely, we dominated. Our freshman team, you were only allowed to play freshman football. Back then, you weren't allowed to play on the varsity. Our freshman team went undefeated and just annihilated people. And then we actually had the last game of the year they called it the Moose game because it was the freshmen against the JV.
Okay.
And whoever won got this moose head. And we actually wound up beating our JV team. And I actually, end of the game, we're winning, and they're going to kick an onside kick. And the coach says, okay, just dive on the ball. And I'm front line of the onside kick, as I've always been. And the ball just hops right into my hands. And what am I going to do? I ran.
Right.
So scored a touchdown, piled on top. It was phenomenal. So we had phenomenal, just a wonderful freshman team. We had about 80 guys. Of those 80 guys, 15 of them finished as players my senior year. Wow. So there was a lot of attrition. Most of the guys stayed at school and got their degrees, which was really kind of cool. It was a way for us to get in there and get educated. I actually wound up transferring into Wharton my second year, and that was just a phenomenal experience. Just the amount of intelligence and just it was just a super, super place to be. And this is the mid-'80s, so it was a very interesting time to be on a college campus. I've got a Wharton degree, and I'm very prideful of that because I worked my butt. That was not easy. That was not easy at all. Education, all the way through high school, I was very, I would study. I had everything laid out, and I could study in front of the TV and still be fine. I discovered in college I couldn't do that. My first report card was 2 B's and 2 C's, and I'd never gotten a C. I'd never gotten below a B in high school. Mm-hmm. And that was something that said, okay, now I got to figure out how to work. So I would go to the library every single day, whether it be after practice or whether in the off season. But I wound up with, 3.3 overall,
Okay, that's
great
good.
point average and 3.8 in my major. So, it was one of those things where you just kind of learned how to work. And I think that's the same thing that kind of transitioned to the NFL of, once you figure out how to stay in, get into the league, you figure out how to stay in the league, and you figure out the level of work and what you really need to focus on. It's one of those things where you just know.
Let's talk about the NFL. You were, and I don't know the details, so you're going to have to correct me if I misspeak, but you started as a Chicago Bear. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Bears signed me. So draft day came and went, and nothing. I didn't get any calls. And after the draft, I got a call from the Bears, and they wanted to sign me. And I said, oh, okay. So they signed me for $1,500 signing bonus. $60,000 was the minimum. And the next thing I know, my parents came for graduation, commencement, and I went and I did the commencement for the Wharton School. Mm-hmm. And then the big commencement on Franklin Field, I was on a plane back here at a mini camp, which is ironic because we used to stay at the Hilton right in Skokie, which is about, a couple blocks from my house.
Right.
So I'm headed back here. I go through mini camp. That was the year they had like 15 rookies make the team. So one of our high picks is Jim Thornton, the RoboCop, who was also a tight end. So they send limos to pick us up, and a whole bunch of guys are coming in. And Thornton's there, and I meet him. I shake his hand, say, how you doing? And I look at him, I say, well, what position are you? He goes, tight end. And they go, oh, crap. He was gigantic. He was enormous. So I'm like, oh, boy, yeah, me too. So I walk in. They give me number 98. I'm an eligible receiver wearing 98. And, the only question was you couldn't give me 106. It couldn't fit on my back. So every time that I would have to go in, and Mike Ditka was the coach, and Jim McMahon was the quarterback, and
right.
I would have to run. The tight ends would run the plays in. So you'd have to give them the alignment, the motions, the play, and I would always have to go and report to the referee. I was ineligible. I was eligible number.
Right.
You have to report it. So every play. So it was kind of annoying, but it was weird because Don Pearson, who was the Sun-Times reporter for the Bears, wrote a story on me, and he called me cannon fodder. And I had to look it up. I was like, wait a second, that's not good. It was what it was. I mean, we were there as bodies,
right, and
made a couple of decent plays. I trying to hustle, trying to do everything I could. My last preseason game was our third, and I got cut the last cut after that. But we were in Dallas, and it was just kind of garbage time. The last couple minutes of the game, and Jim Harbaugh was quarterback, and he was the third string back then. He was my roommate on the road. We're actually both on the road and at home. But Jim threw me a little over. We're on like our 20-yard line. I ran a little 10-yard over the middle hook. He threw the ball to me. I catch it. And in one motion, Brad Muster, who was our number one draft choice that year, comes across below me. I pitch it to him, little hook and trailer. The guy behind him, I take him out with a block. That is like my greatest play that's not anywhere on film. And I need to get that because it was cool. I just caught the ball, one motion, pitched it to him, and then took his guy out. He ran for like 60 yards.
Wow. He
didn't score. He got knocked out at like the 5-yard line. Still giving grief about that. But it was like it was a cool play. And of course, they're on, the broadcasters are on there going, hey, we got Henny rookie from Penn passing it to the guy from Stanford. This is a pretty smart play. Awesome. They must have just drew that up in the dirt. And so that was great. I got that. I'm sitting on the bus after, I remember, after showering, and I'm on the bus going, that I was just basking in the glow of that play, realizing that, my career is probably over. That would be probably the last time I played football. And it was just the nature of the beast. You just knew it was a numbers game. So I got cut that week, bring your playbook. Cool thing was Coach Ditka spent 20 minutes with each guy that he cut. Just sitting there. First of all, he would tell you what you needed to work on. He would thank you for your hard work, tell you what you needed to work on, and then tell you, hey, keep in shape. You never know, but you know what? We really appreciate the work that you've done. It sucked, but it was still something that was, that was pretty cool. So I remember that. And then the third game of the season, I'm home looking for a job. My girlfriend, wife at the time, were hanging out on a Sunday morning watching the game. and Emery Moorhead breaks his leg. And literally that afternoon, I get a call from the Bears. Yeah, we want to sign you back. So I'm like, okay, 4th game of the season. I'm ready to play. I walk in. I said, okay. They said, well, you can't wear 98. I'm like, well, thank God. Because I don't want 98. They said, okay, we got 2 80 numbers because we've got a bunch of numbers that were retired. So you can wear either 83 or 89.
Right.
I said, okay. There's no way in 1988 that I wanted to wear number 83. Because if you remember, 83 during the Super Bowl was a guy by the name of Willie Gault.
Yes.
And Willie Gault was an Olympic sprinter. Willie Gault was fast. So the only thing I'm thinking of is I don't want to be compared to, if I wear 83, I'm going to look slower than and I wasn't that, I ran a 4.740, and I was always first down on punts and kicks, but I didn't want to look slower in comparison. So I, of course, said, I'll take 89. Not even really thinking about it. But, again, Don Pearson says to me, interviews me after, he said, what's it like to wear the coach's number? And I said, I picked it on purpose. It's an honor.
You lied.
I lied by it. Oh, yeah. And, of course, it took me a couple of minutes, but I grew up a Bears fan.
Right.
I knew. Right. But I'm like, all right, this is cool. And Coach Ditka that week said some nice things on his show. And we had a good year. We had 15 of us rookies on that team. I think we went 10-6, and we won the division, I believe. And so we're playing. You know what? I think we won a wild card. But actually, the last game of the year is against Detroit. They cut me the weekend of the game to bring Jim McMahon back because he was injured that whole year. That was his last year with the Bears.
Okay. And
they cut me to bring him back on the roster. So I had a weekend there when we beat Detroit, and we beat them. Kevin Butler kicked a long field goal to beat them in Soldier Field. I was actually up in Green Bay trying out for their team. They brought me up to try out. They weren't making the playoffs. And so I literally ran up there and then came back. The Bears signed me back for the playoffs. And that first game was the Fog Bowl. So literally we're on Soldier Field and we're playing. It's a beautiful day. We're playing Philly and we're doing pretty well. And all of a sudden, about the end of the second quarter, you look at the south end zone and there's like smoke coming out from one of the tunnels. And I'm looking over there, and Buddy Man inside, I'm like, hey, one of the hot dog vendors has got to be on fire or something. What the heck? It just started consuming. And then it came out of everywhere. And it was a really nice warm day. It was the fog. And it was literally, 31st? And it was a warm day, and it just was fog. And you could not see 30 yards ahead of you. We're on the sideline. You couldn't see to midfield. I'm running down on a punt, and literally the ball would just come out of midair.
Right.
So I look over to the left on the sideline, and there's the crew from the broadcast crew. They're trying to see. Nobody can see anything. So the good thing about that is the whole second half, they can't cancel the game, because how do you cancel it? How do you reschedule it? It's just a nightmare. You have to play the game. So it helped us. It helped us win the game, because that's when they had Randall Cunningham, Chris Carter, before he was Chris Carter. And they could throw the ball, and we couldn't stop the pass. We could stop the run. So we wound up winning that game. And, of course, the next game, which was the coldest game I've ever played in my life, was a championship game against the 49ers. And Jerry Rice and Joe Montana just absolutely carved us up. So they beat us. So one game away from the Super Bowl, didn't make it. But then that offseason, they had Plan B free agency, which was, you could protect the top 47 guys on your roster, and then the others are free to move about for a period of like a month or so. So, of course, I'm making $60,000, and the Packers, because I went and visited them, they call me and say, hey, we want to sign you, and we want to give you $25,000 to sign, and we want to give you a $100,000 base salary.
That's
and
great.
I went to the Bears, and I said, hey, here's what the Packers are offering. The Bears are like, we're giving you your deal. We're not renegotiating. And I'm like, well, okay, I guess I got to go. So I wound up going to Green Bay. 3 hours away. I packed up my stuff, took my car, drove up. I missed the turnoff, literally driving up 94. This is 1989. I didn't have any directions. I had kind of a map. And I'm like, guys, just go 94. It's straight up there. You can't miss it. And I'm looking to the right. And I'm like, oh, hey, Lambeau Field. Oh, crap. I just missed go a mile down. You can take the next exit.
Right.
And it's there. And basically all it was at the time is a small town. It had the stadium and then a whole bunch of fast food restaurants. So I was there the entire off season. Lindy Infante was the head coach. There were a couple of guys, there were two older guys that were pretty good that had, John Spagnola and Clint Didier, who had played in the league for years, were tremendous tight ends. Both of them were in their mid-30s. You had Ed West, who was like 26 at the time, who was a starter. And then I'm 23, and I'm coming in there. So the tight end room was, there was these guys. I'm like, okay, well, I'm the young guy. I think I got a shot at this. We'd literally be talking. And Clint Didier said to us, John Spagnola, he goes, I'll be 35 in a couple months. When are you going to be 35? And he said, well, I'll be 35 in 8 months or whatever. And I looked at me, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be 35 in 12 years. So
That's awesome.
I figured I had something on him. So I was running around. Our first scrimmage, I get laid up over the middle going for a ball, and a linebacker comes and just takes my ribs out and just absolutely cracks me. And I'm on the ground. I'm in tremendous pain. I broke 2 cartilage in my ribs. Ooh. So I missed the following day. I missed the morning to get x-rayed. And then I got fitted with a flak jacket, and I came back to the afternoon practice. And I'm like huffing and puffing. I'm in pain, but I'm doing everything I can. As he breaks us that afternoon, Lindy Infante, he gives me grief about missing the morning practice in front of the whole team. It's like, you can't miss practices. I'm like, well, I had to get x-rayed. I mean, what do you want me to do? So I continued to play as best I could. And, it hurt. It was hard to breathe. And they finally cut me the last cut. Lindy Infante never sat me down like Mike Ditka did. Never heard from him again. And my position coach was the one that cut me. And I said to him, well, you guys are cutting me. I didn't want to make it easier. And I'm like, well, what happened? He goes, well, you kind of slowed down after the scrimmage. I said, well, I couldn't breathe. I got a flak jacket. I broke cartilage. He said, well, sorry, whatever. So I left with a really bad taste in my mouth. Just really
the Packers, of course.
Horrible. Well, it's the Packers too. And I mean, literally, I had rented an apartment. I furnished the apartment with really rental furniture. Brought my girlfriend, my fiance now, up there. We were in an apartment above Sterling Sharp. And I get cut, and of course I pack up. I don't want to be there. I want to just get out of, get back to Chicago.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, when we return, we'll be continuing the conversation with Brent Novoselsky, and we'll find out what happened when he returned to Chicago. Stay tuned.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.